Commander Jathik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, his three eyes scanning the holographic displays that floated before him. The massive warship hung in the darkness of space, silent and watchful. For 200 years, the Galactic Council had maintained this position. For 200 years, they had guarded the line. The line was not visible to the naked eye. It was simply a boundary in space, marked by satellites and monitoring stations. Beyond that invisible wall lay the Sol system, home to a species called humanity. The Council had put them there, locked them away from the rest of the galaxy. Some called it protection, others called it a prison. Jathik called it necessary. "All stations report normal activity, Commander," said his second officer, a young Vrelnati female named Shiral. Her scales reflected the blue light from the displays. "The quarantine zone remains secure." Jathik nodded slowly. His people, the Vrelnati, were patient by nature. They could wait for centuries if needed. But even patience had limits. The humans had been behind the line for so long now. Sometimes he wondered if they ever thought about breaking free. 200 years ago, a Council survey vessel had entered the Sol system. It was a routine mission, or so they thought. The ship carried scientists and diplomats, all eager to meet a new species. What they found was not what they expected. The humans attacked without warning. They used primitive weapons, chemical rockets, and nuclear warheads. The survey ship barely escaped. Half the crew died. The survivors brought back horror stories of a violent, aggressive species that shot first and never asked questions. The Council debated for months. Some wanted to destroy humanity before they could become a threat. Others argued for patience and understanding. In the end, they chose containment. They built the line and told humanity to stay behind it. Any ship that crossed would be destroyed. That was 200 years ago. Since then, silence. The humans never tried to contact the Council. They never attempted to cross the line. It was as if they had accepted their fate. "Commander," Kielm called from the science station. The insect-like Trithnari clicked his mandibles nervously. "I'm detecting unusual readings from inside the quarantine zone." Jathik moved to the science station, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet bridge. "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures. Multiple sources. They're moving toward the line." Kielm's antennae twitched. "Sir, these signatures are stronger than anything we've detected from humanity before." A cold feeling spread through Jathik's body. "How many sources?" "Counting now. At least 100, no more. Still counting." Kielm looked up, his compound eyes reflecting genuine fear. "Commander, there are hundreds of ships approaching the line." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member turned to stare at the main display. Jathik felt his heart beating faster. This was it. After 200 years, the humans were making their move. "Sound alert status," Jathik ordered. "Notify Council Fleet Command. Activate all defense platforms." Red lights began flashing throughout the ship. Across the entire fleet, thousands of vessels received the same message. The humans were coming. Counselor Mazir appeared on the communication screen. The elderly Fashir looked tired, his gray skin sagging with age. "Commander Jathik, I just received your alert." "Is this confirmed?" "Yes, Counselor. Human vessels are approaching the line in force. We count at least 300 ships, possibly more." Mazir closed all four of his eyes. "This is what I feared. This is why we kept them contained. They're too aggressive, too unpredictable." He opened his eyes again. "You have authorization to use necessary force. Do not let them cross the line." The communication ended. Jathik stared at the empty screen for a moment. Use necessary force. That meant war. That meant killing. "Sir, the human ships are still approaching," Shiral reported. "They're not slowing down." "Broadcast on all frequencies," Jathik ordered. "Tell them to stop immediately or we will fire." The communications officer, a Helixian with long, flexible fingers, worked quickly. "Broadcasting now, sir. All known human frequencies." They waited. The seconds felt like hours. The human ships continued forward, now less than 1 million kilometers from the line. "Any response?" Jathik asked. "Nothing, Commander. They're ignoring our warnings." Jathik's mind raced. If they crossed the line, he would have to fire. If he fired, thousands would die. But if he let them through, what message would that send? That the Council was weak? That containment meant nothing. "Fleet Formation Delta," he commanded. "All ships, battle positions. Charge weapons." Across the void, the Council fleet moved into position. 2,000 warships, the pride of 12 different species, formed a wall of steel and energy, their weapons powered up, ready to unleash destruction. The human ships crossed the line. They've breached the quarantine zone, Shirel shouted. Commander, what are your orders? Jothic opened his mouth to give the order to fire. But something stopped him. The human ships were not attacking. They were simply moving forward, steady and purposeful. There was no aggression in their formation. They looked almost peaceful. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. It's from the human fleet. Sir, they're speaking in Galactic Standard. Jothic's blood ran cold. Galactic Standard. That was impossible. Humans had been isolated for 200 years. How could they know the common language of the Council? Put it through, a voice filled the bridge. It was human, speaking with careful precision. Council fleet, this is the human vessel Defiance. We are not here to fight. We are here to talk. We know you're out there. We've known for decades. Murmurs spread across the bridge. Kel made a chittering sound of surprise. Shirel's scales changed color, showing her shock. How? Jothic whispered. Then louder. How do you know our language? How did you detect us? The human voice continued calm and steady. 200 years ago, you left something behind when your survey ship fled our system. Debris, wreckage, technology, we studied it. We learned from it. We've been listening to your communications ever since. We know about the Council. We know about the species that make it up. We know about your laws, your culture, your wars. Jothic felt dizzy. The humans had been watching them. Learning. All this time, the Council thought they were in control, thought they were the ones doing the observing. But the humans had turned the tables. You have no right to cross the line, Jothic said, trying to sound authoritative. Return to your system immediately. There was a pause. Then laughter. A human laugh, strange and alien to Vrelnathi ears. Commander, we spent 200 years in a cage. We're done asking for permission. We're claiming our right to the stars. Stand aside or don't, but we're not going back. More ships appeared on the sensors. Not hundreds, thousands. They had been hiding using some kind of camouflage technology the Council couldn't detect. Kelm stared at his instruments in disbelief. Commander, I'm reading over 3,000 human vessels now. Where do they all come from? Jothic didn't answer. He was watching the main display, watching the human fleet spread out before him like a vast net. They had played the Council perfectly. They had appeared weak, isolated, contained. But all along they had been building, growing, preparing. The Defiance transmitted again. We request formal parley with Council leadership. We have much to discuss. The galaxy is bigger than you know, and the threats are greater than you imagine. You need us, Council fleet. You just don't know it yet. Jothic looked around his bridge. Every face showed the same expression. Fear, wonder, confusion. The careful order of 200 years had shattered in moments. Send the message to Council headquarters. Jothic said quietly. Tell them humanity has entered the line. Tell them everything has changed. The Council response came within hours. Do not engage unless attacked. Attempt all first contact protocols. Stall until reinforcements arrive. Jothic read the orders 3 times. Stall. As if the humans were some minor problem that could be managed with procedure and patience. But looking at the thousands of ships on his display, he knew better. This was not a problem. This was a revolution. Begin first contact protocols, he ordered. Sequence Alpha 1. The Council had developed these protocols over thousands of years. They were designed to communicate with any intelligent species, no matter how different. Mathematics was universal. Patterns were universal. Surely the humans would understand. The communications officer sent out the first sequence. Prime numbers. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, simple, clear. A message that said, we are intelligent beings who wish to communicate. The human response came immediately. They sent back the next 20 prime numbers in perfect order, then added a message. We learned your protocols from your databases. Do you have anything new to say? Kelm made a nervous clicking sound. They hacked our databases? When? How? That debris from 200 years ago, Jothic said bitterly. They must have recovered computer systems. Probably spent decades breaking our encryption. He felt a grudging respect for the humans. They were clever. Dangerously clever. Try Protocol Beta 3, he ordered. Universal friendship greeting. The communications officer transmitted complex geometric patterns and color sequences that had been proven to create positive emotional responses in over 50 known species. The council had refined these greetings over millennia. The humans responded with a simple message. Pretty pictures. Now can we talk like adults? Several crew members made sounds of shock. Shiral's scales flushed orange with embarrassment. The humans were mocking them. Counselor Mazir appeared on the screen again, this time with other council members visible behind him. Commander, we're watching your transmissions. The humans are being deliberately provocative. Show them the consequences of crossing the line. Fire warning shots. Jothik hesitated. Counselor, with respect, I don't think warning shots will... That's an order, Commander. Jothik gestured to his weapons officer. Target empty space ahead of the human formation. Plasma cannons only fire. Blue bolts of superheated plasma shot across the void. Each shot contained enough energy to vaporize a small moon. They streaked toward the human ships calculated to pass just ahead of their formation. But the shots never made it past the human fleet. Point defense systems, small and precise, intercepted every single plasma bolt. The shots exploded harmlessly in space, creating brief flowers of light that faded quickly. They stopped our warning shots, the weapons officer said, his voice shaking. Sir, those systems are incredibly precise. Better than anything we have. Jothik pulled up the analysis data. The human point defense had reacted in microseconds. The targeting was perfect. This wasn't luck. This was technology that exceeded council standards. How is this possible? Mazir demanded from the screen. They were primitives 200 years ago. Chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. How did they advance so quickly? Kelm spoke up, his scientific mind working through the problem. Counselor, humans have shorter lifespans than most council species. They live perhaps 80 to 100 of their years. That means they've gone through multiple generations since first contact. Each generation building on the last, each one pushing harder, faster. And they were motivated, Jothik added. We locked them in a cage. Every human child grew up knowing there was a galaxy beyond their reach. That kind of pressure either breaks a species or makes them stronger. Clearly it made them stronger, Shiral said quietly. The main display suddenly filled with new contacts. More human ships appeared, materializing out of empty space like ghosts becoming solid. The fleet count jumped from 3,000 to 5,000, then 6,000, then 7,000. Stealth technology, Kelm breathed. They've been hiding additional ships. We couldn't even detect them. The human voice returned, the same calm tone as before. Council fleet, we're showing you our full strength now. We could have stayed hidden. We could have surprised you. But we're not here for war. We're here for recognition. A new image appeared on all council displays. A human face. The creature had 2 eyes, forward-facing like a predator. Brown skin, black hair cut short. Male probably based on the facial structure. He wore a dark uniform with symbols that meant nothing to council species. I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Space Force. I speak for humanity. We have a proposal for the Galactic Council. Mazir leaned forward. The Council does not negotiate with species who break containment protocols. Then you're fools, Chen Wei said bluntly. While you've been watching us, we've been watching you. Specifically, we've been watching your war. Silence filled every council ship within range. Jothik felt his blood turn cold. What war? Mazir asked, but his voice was weak. Chen Wei smiled. It was not a friendly expression. The war you've been fighting for 80 years. The war against the Krith swarm. The war you're losing. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Jothik could see dozens of council members shouting at their screens. The Krith war was classified at the highest levels. Only military commanders and top council leadership knew the full extent of the threat. How do you know about the Krith? Jothik demanded. Your communications aren't as secure as you think, Chen Wei replied. We've intercepted battle reports, casualty lists, resource allocation requests. We've watched you lose system after system. We've seen your retreat strategies, and we've analyzed your tactics. Another human appeared next to Chen Wei. This one was female with dark skin and gray hair. She wore different clothing, more formal. I am Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo. I speak for Earth's diplomatic corps. The Krith swarm is spreading from the galactic edge inward. Your defensive strategies are failing because you're fighting a war of containment. You cannot contain the Krith. You can only destroy them. And you think you can do better? Mazir asked scornfully. We know we can, Okonkwo said. Because we've been preparing. For 50 years, humanity has been running simulations. We've studied every Krith battle. We've analyzed their tactics, their biology, their technology. We know their weaknesses. Chen Wei touched a control. New displays appeared showing battle scenarios. Human ships engaged Krith vessels in dozens of different situations. The tactics were aggressive, brutal, and effective. You fight defensively, Chen Wei explained. You protect your worlds and wait for the Krith to attack. Then you respond. By then it's too late. You're always reacting, never acting. He highlighted a human strategy. We would fight offensively. We would take the battle to the Krith. We would board their ships, destroy their command nodes, disrupt their hive communications. We would make them afraid. The Council does not approve of such aggressive warfare, Mazir said stiffly. Then the Council will die, Chen Wei said simply. The Krith don't care about your approval. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They consume and they expand. The only language they understand is force. Okonkwo stepped forward. We're offering you a choice, Council. Grant humanity full membership. Give us access to your technology, your intelligence, your resources. In return, we'll help you fight the Krith. We'll show you how to win. And if we refuse? Mazir asked. Chen Wei's smile returned, cold and hard. Then we'll go fight the Krith ourselves. We'll prove our worth by saving the worlds you can't. And when we've pushed the Krith back, when we've done what you couldn't do in 80 years, we'll return. And then we'll have this conversation again. But by then you won't be negotiating from strength. You'll be begging for our help. Jathik watched the council members on his screen. They were angry, frightened, and desperate all at once. The humans had backed them into a corner. Accept them as equals or be humiliated by watching them succeed where the council had failed. This is blackmail, Mazir said. This is reality, Okonkwo replied gently. We're not your enemies, Council. We could have been. We had every reason to hate you after 200 years of imprisonment. But we learned something during those years. We learned patience. We learned to think long-term. And we learned that the galaxy is too dangerous for any species to face alone. Chen Wei nodded. We need each other. You need our tactics and our willingness to take risks. We need your knowledge and your resources. Together we can stop the Krith. Divided we all fail. The transmission ended. The human ships held their position, waiting. Jathik looked at his crew. Every face showed the same confusion he felt. The humans had come with overwhelming force, but they were asking for partnership. They had demonstrated superiority, but they were offering cooperation. It didn't match any profile the Council had developed. They're not what we expected, Kelm said softly. No, Jathik agreed. They're worse or better. I can't decide which. On his screen, Mazir was arguing with other council members. Jathik couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see the result. The council was divided. Some saw opportunity, others saw only threat. But looking at the 7,000 human ships that hung before him, Jathik knew one thing with certainty. Everything had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. The neutral station hung at the edge of the line like a pearl in darkness. It had been built centuries ago for exactly this purpose, negotiations between species that didn't trust each other. The station was automated, protected by powerful shields, and designed to self-destruct if anyone tried to take control by force. Jathik had never actually been to the station before. In 200 years of guarding the line, there had been no need. Now he walked its corridors with careful steps flanked by 2 guards. They were heading to the central meeting chamber where history would be made or broken. The chamber was circular, with seats arranged in a ring. No position was superior to another. No species sat above the rest. It was designed for equality, though Jathik suspected that design would be tested today. Council members were already present. Mazir sat with other senior councilors representing 12 different species. They wore their finest formal clothing, colors, and styles from a dozen worlds. They looked impressive and important. Then the humans arrived and everything changed. Admiral Chen Wei entered first, walking with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Ambassador Okonkwo followed carrying a data tablet. Behind them came 6 other humans, military officers and diplomats. They wore simple uniforms, dark blue with silver details. No fancy decorations. No excessive displays of rank, but they didn't need decorations. Their presence alone commanded respect. Jathik studied them carefully. Humans were smaller than most council species. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. Physically, they seemed unremarkable, but there was something in the way they moved. Purpose, direction, like predators who had chosen not to hunt but could change their mind at any moment. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Okonkwo said. She spoke Galactic Standard perfectly with only a slight accent. "We understand this situation is unusual." "Unusual?" Mazir's voice was sharp. "You broke a 200-year quarantine. You invaded council space with military force. You threaten us with ultimatums. This goes far beyond unusual." Chenwei smiled slightly. "We prefer to think of it as making a dramatic entrance." Several council members made sounds of outrage. Kelm, sitting near Jathik, clicked nervously. But Jathik found himself almost amused. The humans had a strange sense of humor about serious matters. "Let's be clear about the situation," Okonkwo said, her tone becoming more formal. "Humanity has been imprisoned for 2 centuries because of one violent encounter. An encounter that happened when we were barely beginning to explore our own solar system. We've changed since then. We've grown, but you never gave us a chance to prove it." "You proved your nature," Mazir replied. "Violence is what you understand. Violence is what everyone understands," Chenwei said coldly. "The difference is we're honest about it. You dress up warfare with protocols and procedures, but in the end you point weapons at problems just like we do. The only difference is we're better at it." Counselor Traven, a tall Helixian with golden skin, leaned forward. "You claim to understand the Krith threat. Prove it. What do you know about them?" Okonkwo touched her tablet. Holographic displays filled the center of the chamber. Images of Krith vessels, battle formations, attack patterns. Data scrolled past hundreds of pages of analysis. "The Krith are a hive-minded species," Okonkwo began. "Individual units have limited intelligence, but collectively, they form a sophisticated command structure. They communicate through quantum entanglement, which makes their coordination nearly perfect. They don't feel fear. They don't negotiate. They exist only to consume resources and expand." "We know all this," Traven said impatiently. "Then you know their weakness," Chenwei said. "Disrupt the command nodes and the swarm falls apart. The individual units lose coordination. They become easy targets." "We've tried attacking command nodes," Jathik said. "They're too well protected. We lose dozens of ships trying to break through their defenses." "Because you attack from outside," Chenwei replied. "You use long-range weapons trying to break through their shields. We would board them." The chamber fell silent. Boarding actions were considered barbaric, a tactic from primitive times. Modern warfare was conducted at distance with energy weapons and missiles. The idea of actually entering an enemy ship was almost unthinkable. "You can't be serious," Mazir said. "We're completely serious," Chenwei said. "Small teams, heavily armed, using stealth insertion. Get inside their shields, fight through their corridors, destroy the command nodes from within. It's dangerous. Many will die. But it works? How do you know it will work?" Kelm asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. Okonkwo smiled. "We've tested it. Not against the Krith, obviously, but against simulated Krith defenses. We built mock-ups of their ships based on your battle reports. We trained thousands of Marines in close-quarters combat. We ran scenarios for 30 years. She pulled up new images. Human soldiers in heavy armor, carrying weapons that looked brutal and efficient, training facilities that recreated alien environments, endless drills and exercises. "You prepared for a war you weren't even part of," Traven said, sounding impressed despite himself. "We prepared for the war we knew was coming," Chenwei corrected. "The Krith won't stop at council borders. Eventually they'll reach Sol. We'd rather face them with allies than alone." Mazir stood up, his 4 hands clenched in anger. "This is what I warned the council about. This is why we kept humanity contained. You're too aggressive, too militaristic. You think only of war and violence." "No," Okonkwo said firmly. "We think of survival. There's a difference. We don't want war, Council. We want peace, but we're willing to fight for it." She stepped closer to Mazir, meeting his eyes without fear. "You want to know the real reason you kept us behind the line? It wasn't because we attacked one ship 200 years ago. It was because you were afraid of what we'd become if you gave us access to your technology." Mazir said nothing. "You were right to be afraid," Okonkwo continued, "but not for the reasons you think. You weren't afraid we'd conquer you. You were afraid we'd show you what you've forgotten, that sometimes survival requires sacrifice, that sometimes you have to take risks. That sometimes you have to be willing to fight instead of just defend. She pulled up another display. This one showed council battle reports from the past 80 years. A steady pattern of retreat, of worlds lost, of populations evacuated. A long, slow defeat. In 80 years of fighting the Krith, you've never won a major offensive operation. Okonkwo said quietly. You've saved lives through evacuation. You've delayed them with defensive positions. But you've never actually pushed them back. Not once. The council members looked at the data. No one could deny it. We can change that, Chen Wei said. Give us a chance. One battle. Let us prove our tactics work. If we fail, you can send us back behind the line and forget we ever crossed it. But if you succeed, we grant you full council membership, Traven finished. He looked at Mazir. It's a reasonable offer. It's a trap, Mazir said. They'll prove themselves in one battle, join the council, and then gradually take control. They'll remake us in their image. Or, Jothik said, speaking for the first time in the meeting, they'll help us survive. And isn't that worth the risk? Mazir turned to glare at him. Commander, you're supposed to support the council's position. I do support the council, Jothik said calmly. I support keeping the council alive. The humans are offering us a weapon we desperately need. Their tactics may be brutal, but they may also be effective. Can we afford to refuse? The other council members began talking among themselves. Arguments filled the chamber. Some agreed with Mazir, seeing only danger in accepting humans. Others saw opportunity, a chance to finally turn the tide against the Krith. Okonkwo waited patiently while they debated. Chen Wei stood with his arms crossed, watching everything with those predator eyes. The other humans remained silent, letting their leader speak for them. Finally, Traven raised his hand for silence. I propose a compromise. We allow humanity to participate in the next defensive operation against the Krith. They will fight alongside council forces. If their tactics prove effective, we will reconsider their membership status. That's barely different from their original proposal, Mazir protested, but it gives us control. Traven replied. They fight under our command. They follow our rules of engagement. If they prove too aggressive or dangerous, we can end the partnership. Chen Wei and Okonkwo looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Okonkwo nodded. We accept, she said. Under one condition. If we prove our worth, the membership vote happens immediately. No delays, no further tests. One battle, one chance, agreed, Traven said. He looked around the chamber. All in favor? Hands were raised. Not all of them. Mazir kept his four hands firmly down. But enough supported the motion. The vote passed. Then it's decided, Traven announced. Humanity will fight alongside the council fleet. May the void have mercy on us all. Jothik watched the humans as they left the chamber. They walked with satisfaction, like hunters who had successfully stalked their prey. But there was something else too, relief. They had genuinely wanted this partnership. For all their strength and confidence, they had been worried the council would refuse. Kilm clicked quietly beside him. Do you think we made the right choice? Jothik thought about that the alarm came during the night shift, 3 days after the negotiation. Jothik was sleeping in his quarters when the emergency lights flooded his room with red illumination. He was on the bridge within 2 minutes, still fastening his uniform. Report, he ordered. Shiral was at her station, her scales pale with stress. Krith swarm, sir. Massive force. They've entered the Terath system, 3 jumps from here. 2 billion civilians on those worlds. Jothik felt ice in his chest. The Terath system was a core council territory. 3 populated planets, dozens of orbital stations. If it fell, millions would die before they could evacuate. Council fleet is scrambling, Shiral continued. Every available ship is being called to defend Terath, including us, and including the human fleet. Status of human forces? Already moving, sir. They began acceleration the moment the alarm sounded. They'll reach Terath before we do. Jothik pulled up the tactical display. The Krith force was enormous, at least 500 vessels, maybe more. The council could bring perhaps 400 ships to the defense. Not good odds, but they'd faced worse. The Eternal Vigil jumped to hyperspace along with the rest of the fleet. The journey would take 6 hours. 6 hours to prepare, 6 hours to wonder if they would live or die. On the bridge, no one spoke. They had all fought the Krith before. They knew what was coming. When they emerged from hyperspace at Terath, the battle had already begun. The humans hadn't waited. The display showed chaos. Krith vessels swarmed around the three planets like insects around rotting fruit. Their ships were organic-looking things grown rather than built. They moved in perfect coordination, never colliding, never confused. The hive mind controlled them all, and fighting through that swarm were the human ships. Jothik had expected the humans to fight from range, using their advanced weapons to pick off Krith vessels. Instead, they fought like madmen. Human ships dove straight into the thickest Krith formations, firing at point-blank range. They rammed Krith vessels when their weapons overheated. They used the destroyed wrecks of enemy ships as shields while they reloaded. "They're going to get themselves killed," Kelm whispered. But they weren't dying, at least not fast enough to matter. For every human ship destroyed, they took down 4 or 5 Krith vessels. The exchange rate was brutal but effective. "Council Fleet, this is Admiral Chen Wei," the transmission came through. "Good timing. We've been keeping them busy, but there's too many. We need your heavy firepower on the command ships." Jothik pulled up the tactical analysis. The humans had identified the Krith command vessels. There were 3 of them. Massive bioships that coordinated entire sections of the swarm. Destroying them was the key to victory. It always had been, but they were too well protected, surrounded by hundreds of smaller Krith ships. "Admiral Chen, those vessels are behind defensive screens we can't penetrate," Jothik replied. "We'll get you through," Chen Wei said. "Follow our lead. And Commander? This is going to get rough. Tell your crew to hold on." What followed was the most insane combat maneuver Jothik had ever witnessed. The human fleet formed a wedge with their heaviest ships at the point. They accelerated directly at the Krith defensive screen, absorbing terrible damage. Ships exploded. Hulls were torn apart, but the wedge didn't break. They smashed through the Krith lines like a spear through flesh. "All ships follow the human wedge," Jothik ordered. "Pour fire into the command ships." The Council fleet followed, protected by the corridor of destruction the humans had carved. Council warships unleashed their most powerful weapons: plasma cannons, antimatter missiles, graviton beams. The Krith command ships tried to evade, but they were too large, too slow. The first command ship died in a blast of blue fire. Immediately, hundreds of Krith vessels lost coordination. They continued fighting, but their perfect teamwork was gone. They became individuals, easier to target, easier to destroy. "Second command ship forward section," Chen Wei called. "Hit it now." But before the Council ships could target it, a human vessel broke from formation. The ship was burning, its hull breached in dozens of places. It had maybe minutes before total systems failure. Instead of retreating, it accelerated straight at the command ship. "What are they doing?" Shiral gasped. Jothik understood a moment before impact. Ramming speed. The human ship hit the Krith command vessel at full acceleration. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. And another section of the Krith swarm fell into confusion. Did they just sacrifice themselves? Kelm asked in horror. "They saved thousands of lives," Jothik said quietly. "Focus fire on the third command ship." But the humans weren't done with their insane tactics. Dozens of small craft launched from the human fleet. They were tiny things, barely visible on sensors. They flew straight at the remaining command ship, dodging defensive fire with impossible agility. "What are those?" Shiral asked. "Boarding craft," Kelm said, staring at his sensors. "They're actually going to board the command ship." The small craft attached themselves to the Krith vessel like parasites. Explosive charges blew holes in the organic hull. Human soldiers poured inside, hundreds of them, carrying weapons and moving with purpose. On the tactical display, Jothik could see the damage reports from inside the Krith ship. The humans were fighting through corridors, facing Krith warriors in close combat. It was brutal. Casualties were enormous. But the humans kept pushing forward. "They've reached the command core," Kelm reported. "They're planting charges." "All ships pull back from the command vessel," Jothik ordered. "Give them room." The Council fleet retreated. The Krith swarmed around the command ship, trying to protect it. But it was too late. The explosions came from inside. The command ship tore itself apart from within. The hull ruptured in a dozen places. Atmosphere vented into space. The massive vessel began to spin out of control, dying, and with it died the coordination of the entire Krith swarm. The remaining vessels lost all cohesion. They became a mob, dangerous but disorganized. The Council fleet and human ships cut through them with methodical efficiency. 2 hours later, it was over. The Krith were destroyed or retreating. Terath was saved, but the cost had been terrible. Jothik looked at the casualty reports and felt sick. The human fleet had entered the battle with 2,000 ships. Now they had less than 1,200. 40% losses. By council standards, that was a disaster. A defeat even if they'd won the battle. But the humans saw it differently. Terath saved, Chen Wei transmitted. His voice was tired but satisfied. 2 billion civilians safe. 3 Krith command ships destroyed. I'd call that a victory. Jothik watched the human fleet regroup. The surviving ships were battered, scarred, leaking atmosphere and fluids. But they maintained formation. They remained ready to fight. Admiral Chen, Jothik said slowly, your losses were catastrophic. You lost nearly half your fleet. There was a pause. Then Chen Wei replied, his voice soft but firm. Commander, we lost ships. But we saved lives. Human lives. Council lives. Lives we've never even met. Species we barely know. That's not a loss. That's what we came here to do. Jothik closed his eyes. He thought about council warfare, where preserving ships and minimizing casualties was the primary goal. Where retreating to save forces was considered wisdom. The humans had abandoned that entire philosophy. They threw themselves into danger not because they didn't value their lives, but because they valued other lives more. The boarding teams, Jothik asked. How many survived? Another pause. Longer this time. Out of 600 Marines who boarded the command ship, 32 made it out. The rest are gone. 32 out of 600. Jothik felt the weight of that number. Hundreds of humans had walked into certain death to save people they didn't know, and they'd done it without hesitation. On his tactical display, he watched human rescue craft moving through the debris field, searching for survivors. They were pulling council crew from damaged ships even though their own people were dying. They were towing council vessels to safety even though their own ships needed repairs. Shiral spoke quietly. They're not like us. No, Jothik agreed. They're exactly like us. They're just braver about showing it. A transmission came from council headquarters. Councillor Traven appeared on screen. Behind him, Jothik could see the full council chamber. Every member was present. Even Mazir. Commander Jothik, Admiral Chen Wei, Ambassador Okonkwo, Traven said formally. The council has witnessed the battle for Terath. We have reviewed the tactical data. We have seen the human sacrifice. He paused, looking at something off screen. Then he looked directly at the camera. The council votes now on the question of human membership. After what we've witnessed, after what humanity has proven, the vote is merely a formality. But it must be done properly. Traven called for the vote. Hands were raised across the chamber. One by one, council members voted yes, even some who had opposed humanity before. Even Mazir, who raised his hands slowly but raised them nonetheless. The vote is unanimous, Traven announced. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Welcome, humans. Welcome to the stars you fought so hard to reach. On the human flagship Defiance, Admiral Chen Wei stood silently. The memorial took place in space near where the line had once been drawn. Thousands of ships gathered, human and council vessels side by side. They floated in the darkness together, united in grief and respect. Jothik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching the ceremony on his display. Human bodies were being released into space, each one in a sealed container marked with their name and rank. Traditional burial, Admiral Chen had explained, giving their dead to the stars they had fought to reach. 837, Kelm said quietly. That's how many humans died at Terath, Jothik nodded. 837 people who would never see their homeworld again. 837 families who would mourn. It was a small number compared to the billions saved, but each one was a universe of loss. They knew the risks, Shiral said. They went anyway. That's what makes them remarkable, Jothik replied. In the 3 weeks since the battle, everything had changed. Human technology was being shared with council scientists. Human tactical doctrine was being studied by council military academies. Human diplomats were taking their seats in the council chamber, their voices now equal to any other species. But more than that, something fundamental had shifted in how the council thought about warfare. For 80 years they had fought the Krith defensively, always reacting, always retreating. The humans had shown them a different way. Not reckless aggression but calculated risk. Not careless violence but purposeful sacrifice. Kelm pulled up new data on his display. Commander, I've been analyzing the Krith command ship that the humans boarded. The data they recovered is extraordinary. Jothik moved to the science station. What did they find? Location data. The humans found the Krith's navigation records. We now know where they're coming from, which systems they've already consumed, and potentially where their central hive is located. Jothik stared at the data. In 80 years of fighting, the Council had never been able to locate the Krith home systems. They had tried, desperately, but the Krith never left survivors who could provide that information. The humans had found it in one battle by doing what the Council considered impossible. They had gone inside a Krith ship and taken what they needed. This changes everything, Jothik said. With this information, we can plan offensive operations. Real offensives, not just defensive holding actions. The humans are already planning, Kelm said. Ambassador Okonkwo has proposed a joint task force. Human tactics combined with Council firepower. They're calling it Operation Lighthouse. Lighthouse? Human metaphor, Kelm explained. A light that guides ships home. They want to push the Krith back so far that Council worlds will be safe. A light in the darkness, Jothik considered that. For 80 years, the Council had been losing ground. Now for the first time they were talking about taking it back. Not just surviving, but winning. A transmission request came from the Council chamber. Jothik accepted it. Councillor Mazir appeared on screen, looking older than usual. The battle had aged him. Commander Jothik, Mazir said formally, I wanted to speak with you privately before the Council makes its announcement. Of course, Councillor. Mazir was quiet for a moment, his four hands clasped together. I was wrong about humanity. I spent 200 years convinced they were a threat. I fought against their inclusion. I believed containment was the only safe option. He looked directly at Jothik. I watched them die at Terath. I watched them sacrifice themselves for people they'd never met. And I realized something. I wasn't afraid of what humanity would do to us. I was afraid of what they would show us about ourselves. What do you mean? Jothik asked. We've become comfortable, Mazir said. Safe, we avoid risks. We value preservation over action. The Krith have been pushing us back for 80 years, and we've let them because fighting back would cost too much. We've forgotten how to truly fight for what we believe in. He gestured to something off-screen. The humans haven't forgotten. They came out of containment angry and determined. They could have fought us. They could have taken revenge for 200 years of imprisonment. Instead, they offered partnership. They offered to die for us. That takes courage we've lost. You're being too hard on the Council, Jothik said. We've saved billions through evacuation and defense. Yes, Mazir agreed. But the humans saved billions through offense and sacrifice. There's a difference. One prolongs the war. The other ends it. The transmission ended, leaving Jothik alone with his thoughts. He looked at the memorial still playing on his screen. The last of the human dead were being released to space. Behind them, human and Council ships maintained perfect formation. A final salute to those who had fallen. Shirel interrupted his thoughts. Commander, new orders from Council Fleet Command. We're being reassigned. Where? Human liaison duty. We're to work directly with the Terran Space Force, helping coordinate joint operations. She paused. Sir, they specifically requested you. Jothik felt a mixture of honor and trepidation. Did they say why? Admiral Chen said, and I quote, Commander Jothik was willing to trust us when trust wasn't easy. That's the kind of officer we need leading this new alliance. Hours later, Jothik found himself on a transport heading to the human flagship Defiance. It was his first time on a human vessel. The corridors were narrower than Council ships designed for their smaller frames. The walls were covered with displays showing Earth, a blue and green world that looked surprisingly beautiful. Admiral Chenwei met him in the conference room. The human looked tired but determined. Next to him was Ambassador Okonkwo and several other officers Jothik didn't recognize. Commander Jothik, Chen said, extending his hand in the human greeting. Thank you for agreeing to work with us. Jothik took the hand, trying to match the firm grip. The honor is mine, Admiral. Your people proved themselves at Terath. We proved we're willing to die, Chen said. Now we need to prove we can live. The war against the Krith isn't over. It's just beginning. Okonkwo activated a holographic display. It showed the galaxy, with Krith-controlled systems marked in red. There were too many red marks. But now there were also blue marks showing a proposed offensive route. Operation Lighthouse, she explained. We're not just going to push the Krith back. We're going to destroy their ability to wage war. We've analyzed their supply lines, their breeding systems, their command structure. We know where to hit them. "This will be dangerous," one of the human officers said. "We'll lose people. Lots of people. But if we succeed, we can end this war in 5 years instead of another 80. Jothik studied the plan. It was aggressive, risky, and completely against Council military doctrine. It was also brilliant. "When do we begin?" he asked. Chen smiled. 2 months. We need time to repair our fleet, train Council forces in our tactics, and coordinate logistics. But in 2 months we go on the offensive. Over the following weeks, Jothik watched the transformation of the Council military. Human instructors taught boarding tactics to Council Marines. Human engineers helped retrofit Council ships with new weapons. Human strategists shared their doctrine of aggressive, decisive warfare. It wasn't always smooth. Council species struggled with human tactics that seemed reckless. Humans struggled with Council procedures that seemed overcautious. But slowly they learned from each other. The Council became bolder. The humans became more disciplined. Kelm spent hours with human scientists analyzing the data from the Krith command ship. He reported back with growing excitement. "The humans think differently than us," he explained to Jothik. "When we encounter a problem, we try to solve it within existing knowledge. Humans ask, what if we try something completely different? It's maddening but effective." The memorial satellites that had been placed near the old line were gradually removed. In their place, new construction began. Joint defense stations crewed by both human and Council personnel, training facilities where the two forces could learn together, diplomatic outposts where ideas could be exchanged. The line itself, that invisible boundary that had separated humanity from the galaxy for 2 centuries, was officially dissolved. In its place, Council cartographers simply marked human space on their maps, integrated with Council territory as if it had always been there. 6 months after the Battle of Tareth, the Joint Fleet assembled for Operation Lighthouse. Over 3,000 ships, the largest offensive force in Council history. Half were Council vessels, half were human. All flew the new combined fleet banner, a symbol that represented both peoples working together. Jothik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, now designated as a command ship for the Joint Fleet. Shiral was at her station, her scales showing excitement rather than fear. Kelm worked with a human scientist, both of them analyzing final target data. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the communication screen. "All ships report ready, Commander. We're waiting on your order." It was a small gesture, giving Jothik the honor of starting the operation, but it meant something. It meant the humans saw the Council as true partners, not just followers. "All ships," Jothik said clearly. "Execute Operation Lighthouse. Take us to the Krith home systems. It's time to end this war." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, thousands of ships moving as one, human and Council, different but united, heading toward a